Welcome to another episode of Women Investing in Women. My co host Robin and I, week after week, take the time and invest in featuring different women from different parts of the world to showcase their life purpose, their impact, and how they are transforming the world around us. It is only by women supporting each other, women amplifying each other's voice, and women lifting each other up, we are going to continue to build a world that behooves us as women, as mothers, as sisters, and nurturers of the world we live in. It is going to take all of us to come together and truly support each other's purpose, each other's cause, because together we can address the various elements that ails us, various ways in which we are harmed, and how we get past all of that and how do we build a more peaceful, equitable world around us is truly in our hands. And today, you are going to love the conversation. And this is going to be rooted in how do we take some of the pain that life throws our way and how do we transform that to purposefully eliminate the pain for others so that others don't suffer and go through the tragedies we go through. So with that idea in mind, with an open heart, please welcome our guest to Women Investing in Women. And I am going to let Robin introduce her dear, dear sister who is making magical impact in the community around her. Take it away, Robin.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have my sister, Jaynie Brown, here. And she's my older sister, has been my mentor and friend and confidant and inspiration my entire life, literally. And I invited her because she, along with her husband, created the Strengthening Families program. And this was rooted in tragedy where their grandson, baby Matthew, was killed by a drunk driver. And they became involved with MAD and then developed this Strengthening Families program. And so what I'd like to know is, Jaynie, what were the stepping stones from this terrible tragedy to MAD and then to Strengthening Families program? And what was it that kind of led you along this path to where you are now?
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate being on to share some ideas and wonderful research with you all. One of the things that was most impactful in my life, as Robin said, was when our little grandson, our first grandson, we call him baby Matthew, was killed by a drunk driver. And it was really a great tragedy to have my daughter and injured, and my son-in-law and they had two little children in the car with them, and the drunk had been drinking all day at a bar, and when he ran out of money, they kicked him out and put him on this car, and off he went. And that pain was so intense that I said to myself, I feel like I have to just scream it out. And then I said, nobody should be suffering this. And that was my first introduction to drunk driving. And so at that point, a representative from Mothers Against Drunk Driving came to visit us. And I said, I need to become involved. And then when my daughter Natalie and her husband, they graduated from their MBA program and moved to Detroit, she said, Mom, I'm putting the torch in your hand. And so I became a lobbyist with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And I was rather timid and shy. And it was kind of scary for me at first. And I went with a fellow lobbyist from Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And through that experience of being so scared at first, I remember walking back and forth in front of these huge doors where the legislators were meeting. And I had a little paper in my hand, and you're supposed to give it to the page, and he takes it in and gives it to the legislator. And if he happens to want to talk to you, then he'll come out during that meeting and going back and forth saying, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And here am I, my little red coat, going back and forth. And with and there's all these $100,000 lobbyists there. And I said, finally, I can do this. And I handed it to a page, and he came out and started talking to me. I explained why we needed this bill and why it was needed to be passed. And he said, okay, I'll vote for it. And I was astounded. I said, okay. And I was on my way. And so I lobbied for a few years there. And I was on the Salt Lake City Mayor's Coalition. And there I met Dr. Carol Comfort. And I'll correct Robin just a little bit. So I didn't start the Strengthening Families program. Actually, Dr. Comfort did. And we became, and it was actually a class program for children and parents. And she'd actually received a grant from the National Institutes of Health. And the grant's main object was find out what skills parents need to be able to keep their children from alcohol and drug use. And this was to be tested with parents who were in recovery in a methadone maintenance program. And so she did that 5 years. She researched what are the best skills parents need and came up with about 10 of them. And as she talked about at the mayor's office, we would meet around this huge table every month. And she was a professor at the University of Utah. And they would say, well, the mayor came in and he said, I want to get rid of DARE. It doesn't work. Find me something else. And people were trying to discover what really work in the community. And occasionally she'd say, well, why don't you try the Strengthening Families program? And I thought, well, nobody's picking it up, so it must just be her thing. And one day I decided, well, I'm just going to go take a look. So I went to a class that was being held for parents and youth and found it was really quite extraordinary. And we actually have 7 children. And they were all raised by then, and mostly raised. And I just went home and I said to my husband, he worked for IBM, and I said, if we had had all this training, our whole life would have been easier. I dragged him down and he said, wow. He said, our whole life would have been easier if we had had this training. And so therefore we decided we want to take this to everyone. And I have a degree in broadcast journalism. And I went to Carol and I said, Carol, I'll create a home use video series of your program if you'll give us permission to do that. And she said yes. And so around that time, my husband retired from IBM, and he and I talked him into joining MAD, and he actually he's been the president of Mothers Against Drunk Driving in Utah. And so he takes over most of those legislative issues and works with Highway Patrol and works with youth suicide. He works with all of those issues that are so important to protecting children and families. And I take on the Strengthening Families program. And so we became business partners, Dr. Comfort and I. I'm just going to show you our logo. And so we had a new logo made. And if you'll notice it looks a little bit like a brain. But if you look at it closely, you'll see all these little figures. And that one person can make a difference for generations. And that's what's so exciting. And what we discovered from the research is, if you look at addiction in America, it costs us every year about $850 billion. And that's not counting the suffering of those who go through it. When people say, drug abuse is life abuse, that is so true. And not only do we have the problem of the person who's addicted and suffering from substance abuse disorder, but we have the effect on their children. And the ripple effect is enormous. 40% of the children who have parents with an addiction disorder begin using themselves. And then they have issues like attachment disorder and adverse childhood experiences. And that changes their brain and who they become. And we realized that what the most astounding thing was, 95% of all those who have addiction disorders in America began before they were 18. And so if we look at addiction and how we can stop the problem, we can't arrest our way out of it. We can't treat our way out of it. And we can't stop the flow, because now we've known and we've seen through the research, and we've actually seen on the streets that the drug cartels have infiltrated even our schools. And so there's only one way to handle the problem, and that's to train parents and youth together and to teach them the skills they need to keep their brain healthy and strong, and to teach them the skills they need to have wonderful family relationships. You could ask me a few questions now, and then I can explain some of the basic things that parents need to do and what we as parents can do to make things better in the world.
Cass,
See,
you're
I think
muted.
okay.
Thank you so much, Jaynie, for setting the stage up and giving us context. And I love the branding and the image. Yes, one person becomes the trunk that anchors the roots, and then everybody else becomes the extension of that. And if we have one person like that in every community, our communities are going to be so much better. What I want to find out is, what are some of the challenges you as an organization face in bringing parents and children together in a time and space where parents and children don't have time for each other? We saw for the first time during COVID, parents actually got to meet their children and get to know them because they were all stuck in the same house, right? So how are you able to help them come together and work on this when social pressures require them to work multiple jobs to keep a roof over their head? How are people balancing it?
And that's a really great question. And so we tried to solve that at first with, because we can have classes where parents and children come to the classes. And so we actually have an organization of trainers, and they go throughout the United States and in some foreign countries. And they actually, 30 foreign countries actually, and we train people, agencies, to then bring families in who are in trouble and to work with the troubled families. And that works extraordinarily well. And so there's one way, but we want to get the training before they get into trouble, because it's very hard once their brain, alcohol and drugs hijacked the pleasure motivation system in their brain, and so they then will crave that. So the idea is, how do we help them before then? So we have the Strengthening Families program website, and on there we have the videos. People can watch them. The introduction video is free. If they go to strengtheningfamiliesprogram.org, they can then click on families resources or on the videos, and they can actually watch the 10 lessons together. So that's one way. And then we decided we wanted to have it more interactive. And we know that that works because we've done a randomized control trial of families who had no training versus those who had the Strengthening Families videos, watching those. And we actually found a tremendous difference in the family relationship skills. So that's one way they can do it. But then we decided we wanted to do more than that, and we wanted to make it more interactive. So we applied to the National Institutes of Health and received a grant to create a gamified version, and it will be released in a few weeks. And they wanted us to take the video clips, make them gamified and interactive. And so we have a parent track and youth track, and then they can each learn these wonderful, extraordinary family relationship skills, and then they're able to have their family, and it's organized in a brilliant way so that all of the comments they put back in go into a family dashboard and a family agenda, and then the families can work on that together. And so that's almost ready to be released. And now we're looking to get funding to put it's in English. We're looking for funding to put it into Spanish. And we also want to put it into Mixteco. And that's a language spoken by most of the farm workers. And it wasn't until just a few years ago, it wasn't even a written language. And so we want to put that in audio track and have all the parents be able to do that. And so the challenges are, first of all, to get it translated in other languages and to get the funding to be able to do that. I think the most important and useful thing that parents would like to know right now is, how do we make a difference in our own families? And the research shows us that there's actually 3 basic types of skills. And if they're used together, then children almost never use. So the first is bonding, and that's creating warm, loving relationships. And we actually teach skills to parents on how to bond with them, to play one-on-one, to complement the good, to practice mindfulness breathing with their children so that they can calm themselves down, and to have family dinner together. And so that's the very first skill we teach, a bonding skill to be able to connect as families. Then we have the next skill is called boundaries. And I wish I had PowerPoints to show these visually. So boundaries are really clear, firm rules and consequences against underage drinking and drug use. And the research shows us that if parents make really clear, firm rules so that the kids know that it's very wrong and not just sort of wrong, they're very reluctant to use, especially if they become bonded to their parents, because then they don't want to disappoint them. And then we have the third skill is called monitoring, and that means to supervise your kids. And that means you always know where they are, who they're with, and what they're doing, and whether there's going to be alcohol or drugs there. And then you check up on them. And you show up at the party with a bag of chips. Oh, I thought you might like these chips. Oh, you might, my daughter's not there. Oh, let's have a chat. Okay. And so knowing that your kids know you're going to be monitoring, they are very, very reluctant to get into trouble and have consequences. And so if you combine those three skills together, they almost always will prevent underage drinking. So how do we know this? So as part of my job with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, I passed some legislation, helped pass legislation that created a media campaign aimed at parents to keep their kids off alcohol and drugs. And it's funded by alcohol tax profits. And so every year, then we receive from the state, not we ourselves, but this it's called the Underage Drinking Task Force. And they're actually a state organization and funded by these alcohol profits. And we put in the law who had to attend. So anyone who works with children has to attend this weekly meeting. And we produce wonderful ads. It's called parentsempowered.org. And we also put in funding to check whether or not our ads were effective. And the state has because you can't just keep giving money to a program that doesn't work. So our state actually now has, every 2 years, they have a huge survey for 50,000 kids in 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th grades and ask some questions. And some of those are your relationship with your parents. Have you ever used? And so out of these 106 questions that the kids answer in school over a period of a couple of days, then there's a company who actually monitors all of that and does a statistical analysis. And what we've seen is you can have bonding with your kids, but if you don't have boundaries, they're going to use. And in fact, it's got to be real firm boundaries. And if you don't monitor your kids, they have such a huge peer pressure, they're going to use. And so if you want to affect your own family and your own people you live with, you can do the bonding, the boundaries, and the monitoring, and we teach you the skills to do it. And we teach, and we have them practice the skills in class. And we have them in our videos, we say pause and practice, and then they know precisely the skills. So we tell them a skill is like, tying your shoes or even feeding yourself with a spoon. So how did you learn to do that? And then we show them videos about how their brain wires and develops as they practice. And so what are the challenges? The challenges are funding, basically, because once we can have this in more languages, we can get it throughout the whole world. And if you want to create peace and love and in your family and get rid of addiction in the world, this is the proven way to do it. So it's really quite remarkable. It's what started off as just a desire to help prevent drunk driving has now blossomed into the understanding and the vision and the ability to affect the whole world. And I'm grateful to share that with you all.
This is so beautiful and so amazing. And in listening to you explain all of this, which has been obviously decades long process, it sounds like this lovely river flowing. It flowed from here and from here and to here and to here. But I know for a fact that you hit a lot of obstacles along the way. And so I'm wondering, what were some of the practical obstacles that you had to overcome, and also some of the internal obstacles that you had to overcome to go from this, an idea to lobbying to, hey, let's make this into a program. Hey, let's make this into videos. Hey, now let's gamify it. That's a decades-long process. So what were some of the practical obstacles and then internal obstacles that you had to deal with?
Some of the practical obstacles are actually the alcohol and drug industries, and they're huge. And so, and they have very high pay lobbyists, and we're actually working on vaping and actually to reduce all the flavors. And we passed that bill, and now they're fighting it with lawsuits. Okay, but that was the first time I went to. There was a meeting about the fact that they wanted to build a bar right close to a school, and there's actually a law that said you have to be at least 600 feet away. And so little did I know that all of the decisions are actually made behind the scenes, and before it ever comes to a public hearing. That was my first introduction to the reality. And so when I got there, I had these huge posters of the crash car, and I walk in, and this room's filled with all of these people, and they're all lobbyists from the alcohol and drug industry. And so the man directing it, Senator Valentine, he heard all the testimony of why it was okay, and I had all the facts and figures from the national research that was harmful. And because if kids believe that this is pleasurable, then they will use. And so then I went up and gave my presentation, and he said, well, I need to look into this more. Why don't we table this bill that was going to change the law and allow this to happen? And I thought that was a great idea. Nobody else in the room did. So I walk out in the hallway, and I'm accosted by these angry men. And they said, what are you doing? This was all arranged. What are you trying to do? Throw this, and they were all yelling at me. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is really an odd way to treat me. Okay. And so he said, well, I have the research and it's correct. And so I just walked off because I'm a pretty gutsy lady. And then a few days later, I was I was at an airport, a little tiny airport, actually, on my way to a little tiny town to speak at a university campus, and I get a phone call on my phone, and they said, "Okay, what do you want, lady?" I went, "What I want?" Okay, and they said, "Okay, we know, we're trying to do this, and it's really a good, okay thing, and what do we want?" Well, we have the alcohol beverage control. They were lobbied to change it to alcohol beverage service, and in our state, you can't buy alcohol except for ordinary beer at the grocery stores. And they said, and I couldn't hear them very well. I was crackling phone, and they said, "Well, go find a payphone." Well, how do you find a payphone? Well, I actually did find a payphone, and they said, "What's the number? We'll call you." Okay, so they called me on the payphone, and they said, "Look, we're passing this bill. So what do you want?" I didn't know what I wanted, but all of a sudden out of my mouth said, "I want the policy for the alcohol beverage control to change, and I want their new mission statement, and I want their new mission statement to say we will sell in a way that does not encourage underage drinking and does not encourage drunk driving, and I want to." And they said, "And what else?" And I said, "And I want a full-time employee who FTE, full-time employee, who will then run an anti-drinking campaign," which we didn't have yet, an anti-underage drinking campaign, and I wanted to be able to do that throughout the whole state. And they said, "Well, how much money do you want?" And I thought, well, I need 100,000, so I better ask for more. So I said, "I want $300,000 every year." And they said, "Got it, you've got it, lady." And they hung up. So that was my first obstacle. Was well, where did all that come out of my mouth? Okay, well, that transformed into a tremendous ability to then create this media campaign and create that, and we've had a long-term relationship now, and we speak at those alcohol beverage control monthly meetings and lobby, and we have somebody on our side. So that's one of the things that was astounding and really quite amazing to me. The other was trying to get funding, get a grant from the National Institutes of Health. Now, I have a son who's a doctor, and he said, "Mom, that's like a high school kid." Okay, I'm just this little grandma, right? He said, "Mom, that's like that's like a high school kid trying to make the MBA. Okay. And I said, well, we'll give it a try, right? So not knowing how to write grants, I learned and got some help and paid some people to help me. And we actually received a huge grant for $1.2 million, which is what it took to create. And so now we're after our second grant, and to translate it not only into Spanish, but other languages, and to actually put it into a video type of game that they can learn. And so it's quite an amazing thing. And so if people want to go to it, it'll be out in a couple of weeks, like I mentioned, and it's called Finding SFP, that stands for Strengthening Families Program, SFP hyphen Finding Home, all one word, .org, no .com. Okay, SFP hyphen findinghome.com. And so in a couple of weeks, you'll be able to see that. And it's wonderful because we teach communication skills and not criticizing and getting rid of your negativity bias that causes so much unhappiness in families. And we teach them positive discipline, that we're to be nurturing parents. And we teach the children the skills of how to organize their time and how to, and we actually have one whole lesson on alcohol and drugs and how it hijacks your pleasure motivation system, and how to refuse in a fun way so that you have the courage to do it. And so all the skills that you would want to create a loving family home and create a world of peace and addiction free is there. And so we're really excited about the fact that it can change the world. And I know that sounds small, that sounds hyperbole, it sounds like it's huge, and it's actually the fact. And so we have several countries who've already contacted us. We've had people from China, 2 PhDs, different ones. We have people, I went to Hong Kong and presented, and they actually translated our Strengthening Families lessons in Cantonese, and they sent me a copy and had me come and speak and to present it. So I think that facts is all over the world, people are looking for ways to create peace and love and family and addiction-free children and help them to be emotionally resilient. And that's what we offer, the skills training to do that. Every skill is broken up into 4 little steps. And I'll give you one example. So how to follow instructions. Children learn how to follow instructions. And we don't call it obey your parents because then no one would like it. So we call it follow instructions. And we say, this is an adult skill. We all have to follow instructions. So you look at the person, you repeat back what they want you to do. You say okay, and you do it the best you can, and then you come back and you report. And so those are 4 little skills of following instructions. And so we have the kids learn. So every skill, communication skill, we call it LUV, listen, understand, and validate. So we break the skill down of communication into little steps. And we even have 7-year-olds practicing how to validate, oh, I see your point of view. Okay, I don't feel that way myself, but I see how you feel about it. And we have parents validating their children and children validating their parents. And it's quite amazing to see. And so I took their 14-week lessons and I reorganized them and put them into 10 easy to follow lessons. And we're excited about it.
Beautiful. You have given so much information. And you actually preempted our final question and gave us information on how our audience can get in touch with you. So thank you. Thank you so much for that. And it's amazing how quickly the time flies. We've run through 30 minutes and then some. So let me take a moment and thank you, Jaynie, for making the time to engage in this conversation with us, help our audience understand the value and the power of the Strengthening Families program. And we'll make sure when the episode is released, the information and the website to your program is available. And to our audience out there, we each are a part of a family, and we each have the love and obligation to make sure our families are strong, our children, our grandchildren as an entire unit. There is love, there is safety, there's nurturing. And why don't we come together and make it fun? Why don't we make it work for all of us? And keeping in mind what we do inside our families have the power to affect other families. So let's build our families mindfully. Let's make sure that we understand that we impact each other's lives, and let's impact it with love and nurturing and kindness.